Close your eyes and imagine that the person you love most in the world has just taken their final breath. You collapse to your knees, holding their body as it slowly grows cold for a few more moments. Even though every part of you knows they will never come back, your arms tighten around them until you realize there is nothing you can do, and somehow you still cannot let go. Now place that unbearable grief into the world of 34,000 years ago, in the heart of the brutal Ice Age, a world where a single freezing wind could extinguish life itself, and where every minute of hesitation, every second spent surrendering to sorrow, could cost an entire tribe its survival. Surrounded by endless snow and the constant shadow of death, would you still choose to stay? A small community living in what is now Russia once faced that very choice. The decision they made left behind evidence so extraordinary that modern archaeologists have been forced to rethink nearly everything we believed we understood about the people of the Ice Age. But before we can understand why they chose to stop instead of walking away, we first have to confront one uncomfortable truth. In that ancient world, survival was never guaranteed. Every decision, no matter how small, was paid for with blood, exhaustion, and sacrifice. So what exactly did that unforgiving world demand from them? In exchange for the simple privilege of staying alive, in the heart of the Ice Age, every passing hour demanded a ruthless trade between food and survival. There was no room for wasted time, and even less for wasting precious energy. To stay alive, most hunter-gatherer bands had no choice but to move their camps every few days. They walked for 6 to 12 miles across frozen, desolate landscapes, following the tracks of migrating herds wherever they led. In that world, a dead body was more than a tragedy. It was an invitation. Wolves, hyenas, and the largest predators of the Ice Age were all drawn to the scent of death. In a land already overflowing with danger, remaining in one place for too long could turn a single moment of hesitation into a death sentence for the entire tribe. By every law of survival, the answer was brutally simple: leave immediately. It was an unwritten rule, the most fundamental instinct that allowed hunter-gatherer communities to survive through those unforgiving ages. They understood exactly what was at stake. Stay too long, and the tribe could starve, freeze in a blizzard, or worse, become prey for the predators already racing toward the scent of death. And yet, one community chose to break that sacred law of survival. They stayed. They remained beside the body of one of their own. And what they quietly chose to do instead of walking away was buried beneath layers of ice, hidden for tens of thousands of years, until archaeologists finally uncovered the heartbreaking truth: 2 children from the tribe had died. By every cold calculation of survival, the community should have erased all traces of their presence and moved on immediately. Instead, they made a decision that seems almost unimaginable. They stayed. Close your eyes and picture that winter night. Outside the shelter, an icy wind screamed through the cracks in the rocks. A single fire burned weakly, the only source of warmth and light for miles in every direction. Around that fire, a small group of people sat shoulder to shoulder, working through the night, and then the next, and the next. They were not hunting. They were not gathering food to fill their empty stomachs. Instead, they patiently sewed tiny ivory beads, one after another, onto ceremonial garments for the 2 children, clothing those children would never have the chance to wear in life. In total, there were more than 10,000 ivory beads. Every single one had been individually shaped and drilled entirely by hand. Researchers estimate that this craftsmanship alone required somewhere between 3,500 and 10,000 hours of labor spread across countless nights and many different hands. This was not a hurried funeral that lasted an afternoon. It was weeks, perhaps even months, deliberately devoted by an entire community while food supplies dwindled and death crept ever closer. They carefully covered the children's bodies with red ochre, a rich crimson pigment that many scientists believe symbolized blood or perhaps life itself. Beside them, they placed exquisitely crafted mammoth ivory spears, among the finest prehistoric weapons ever discovered. They were so perfectly straight that even today, modern craftsmen cannot fully explain how ancient people managed to shape mammoth ivory with such precision without a single metal tool. In a world where every passing hour could decide whether an entire tribe starved or survived, they stopped. They chose to remain in the freezing darkness and devote themselves to this, which leads to the greatest mystery of all. The real question is not what treasures they buried with those children. The real question is this: what could possibly be powerful enough to make a starving community, already living on the edge of extinction, willingly gamble its own survival simply to stay? This is the story of the Sunghir burial, one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries ever made about humanity during the Ice Age. And remarkably, it was not an isolated case. Thousands of miles away at Tafaralt in present-day Morocco, archaeologists uncovered the graves of 6 infants buried around 14,500 years ago. They had been laid to rest with the same care and dignity given to fully grown adults. 2 of them, perhaps brother and sister, were marked with deep red stones placed upon their graves, as if their community wanted to leave behind an everlasting reminder that these children would never be forgotten. Far to the north, in what is now Alaska, at a site called Upward Sun River, 2 newborn babies died near the end of the Ice Age. They were buried alongside finely crafted hunting weapons and carefully made tools, objects that those infants had never used and never could have used. Yet the grieving community clearly believed they were necessary to protect their spirits. Different continents, different centuries, communities that never met, never shared a language, and never even knew the others existed. Yet every one of them made the very same choice. They stopped. They stayed with the dead instead of walking away. But here is the detail that changes everything we thought we knew. Years later, as science advanced, researchers extracted DNA from the 2 children buried at Sunghir. Until then, everyone had assumed they must have been siblings, or at the very least, close relatives. They were wrong. The genetic results revealed something astonishing. The 2 children were not biologically related at all. That single discovery overturned everything. The thousands of hours of painstaking work beneath the dim firelight, the 10,000 hand-drilled ivory beads, the finest weapons the tribe was capable of making, none of it had been done because of family obligation. Every one of those extraordinary sacrifices had been made for 2 children who did not share the same parents. Children who were family in every meaningful sense, except by blood. If this remarkable behavior appears again and again across history, on continents that never touched, among people who never met, and if that love could flourish even without blood ties, then what were our ancestors truly trying to preserve? Perhaps it was never just the bodies of those children. Perhaps what they refused to let disappear was something far more fragile: the invisible scent of compassion and the deepest part of what makes us human. No matter how beautiful the grave goods were, they could never bring the dead back to life. Stopping in the middle of a blizzard, carrying out ceremonies that lasted for weeks, and showing extraordinary care in every smallest detail. None of those remarkable acts were truly for the ones who had died. They were for the ones who were still alive. Funeral rituals allowed a small community to face overwhelming grief together. They became an invisible thread that held the group together, giving its members the strength to lean on one another and survive. Instead of allowing sorrow to quietly consume them from within, and tear the community apart. This may have been one of the greatest turning points in human evolution, learning to transform private grief into a shared ritual. Instead of letting loss tear the community apart, modern psychologists have reached a remarkably similar conclusion. Families and communities that acknowledge loss together through funerals, gatherings, or shared mourning tend to recover from grief in healthier and more resilient ways than those forced to face it alone. It turns out that rituals were never truly for the bodies resting beneath the earth. So if this extraordinary power was always meant to protect the living rather than the dead, could that same ancient instinct, that invisible thread first woven in the Ice Age, still be quietly alive inside you today? After tens of thousands of years of evolution, the modern human brain still responds to loss in almost exactly the same way as the people of Sunghir did. We still choose to stay beside those taking their final breaths, keeping watch through the night instead of walking away. We still hold funerals to say goodbye. We still treasure keepsakes, and we still quietly visit the graves of those we have lost. The only difference is that the ivory beads and simple red ochre of the Ice Age have taken on new forms. We keep an old voice message on our phones that we can never bring ourselves to delete, just so we can hear that voice one more time. We leave a familiar phone number in our contacts for years, even though we know no one will ever answer again. And on quiet nights, we find ourselves scrolling through old conversations, reading messages that were never meant to be read a second time. None of these things can bring them back. Deep down, every one of us already knows that. Yet we do them anyway? Not because the dead need them, but because the living do. Because the ones left behind are the ones trying to gather the broken pieces of themselves back together. From the brutal Ice Age to the comfortable world we live in today, humanity's need to heal has hardly changed at all. Only the treasures we cling to have changed. So the next time you find yourself unable to leave someone's bedside or staring at an old message, unable to press delete, pause for just a moment and ask yourself one question. Are you holding on for them? Or are you quietly trying to protect and heal yourself? So the next time you choose to stay beside a hospital bed for just one more minute, or find yourself unable to leave a funeral too soon, remember this: you are not alone. You are repeating the very same choice that a small community made 30 to 40,000 years ago. They had no surplus food, no medicine to heal their wounds, not even a truly safe shelter against the storms. And yet, in the harshest winters this planet has ever known, they still chose to stay. Perhaps what has always made us truly human was never our ability to craft remarkable tools, discover fire, or survive the endless cold of the Ice Age. Perhaps it has always been something far quieter. That sacred helplessness we feel when we simply cannot bring ourselves to walk away from someone we love while they are still right there before us.